Hi everybody, Eric Dorward here with the Spartan Rocketry Club for part 2 of our Estes Antar build. So in the meantime, since the last video, the glue has dried on the pieces that I've constructed here. One last thing we need to do with them before we can put them aside is to round the lead edges. Now, the instructions don't tell us to round the trailing edges, which I frequently do. So at this point, I've only just rounded the leading edges. Some of these were a little difficult, mainly because my block isn't as long as the leading edges. So that meant that if I was sanding this way, I was missing the front edge. And that made for some inconsistent sanding. And also, this little piece sticking out made it difficult to sand right in there. However, I managed to do it. There's one last piece that needs to be sanded. That's this guy right here. So just as a reminder, the easiest way to do it is to just roll the sanding block over the edge that you want to round, and then repeat on the other side. Pull off the sanding, dust, and then take a look. I didn't round this particularly effectively, so I need to do a little bit of maintenance work. And some of this was particularly soft balsa, I thought. So little pieces, like threads of it, got kicked up on a few of these. So those needed to be removed. And to do that, I just kind of run the sanding block over the edge like so. Oops. So the front end of it looks pretty good. The back end of it is a little misshapen and needs a couple swipes on this side. And you can see I've got a little bit of this thready business going on there. So we'll just get rid of that. And the problem with this one, and with a bunch of them, is that the middle didn't get sanded particularly well. So, it's great that the front end and the back end look nice, but the middle is just as important when it comes to making a nice aerodynamic shape. So we need to do some work on that. Ultimately here, this is kind of a finesse thing rather than a do it 10 times and call it done kind of approach. All right, that looks passable. So I've got 2 rear fins. I've got this extra long one, which you recall we glued together. There is a little bit of work that needs to be done on this. I did round these bits. This long edge is particularly difficult, mostly, not because it's like hard to sand or anything, but if you are working too hard on this, you could certainly snap the joint. And you really wouldn't want to do that because you spent all that time making it nice in the first place. So a couple items. One is the glue has dried pretty well at this point, so this needs to be sanded. In fact, I think I'm going to switch over to a little piece of sandpaper here. Both sides, of course. Glue is rough. And while that's not perfect, that still needs a bit more work. The other side is pretty good. We just want to get the excess glue, and if there's any wax paper that got stuck, that could be problematic. The other thing is the joint right here at the edge is a little off. It doesn't look quite right. And part of that might have been my sanding work, so we can definitely kind of use a little bit of sandpaper here to try to smooth that out. But ultimately, what we're going to do is, like with the rest of the fin, we're going to put a filler on it. And that should, if there's any kind of inconsistency here, which it actually looks pretty good at this point, but here at the edge, that's going to require a little bit of fill to make it look the way it should. So anyway, fins are taken care of. I might round the tail end here, but we don't need to do that now. So those can go away. What we're going to do next then is we are going to take care of the motor mount. The motor mount is going to be more complicated than what we are used to because it has some accoutrements on it. So it is not just a straight up motor mount that's going to be hiding inside of the rocket body. It has some protrusions. So I hadn't opened this, obviously. A lot of stuff we don't need, like a parachute. Certainly don't need that right now. Shock cord can come back later. There's the mount, there's the hook. Launch lug we will put aside. Clay for the nose cone, we will deal with that later. The other thing we need is this piece of cardstock. There are a couple things we got here. We've got the adapters here that are going to go into the tube, and we've used them before. They're nothing particularly out of the way. You certainly could cut these pieces out with the hobby knife, but they tend to pop out pretty nicely. These other little things are the little doodads that are going to go onto the end of the rocket, end of the motor mount, sticking out to make it look all fancy. These, I'm happy so far with the way they're punching out, but you have to be quite careful to not warp the cardstock when you're punching them out, because then your finished product would be all twisted, and we don't want that. So these are coming out pretty nicely. Great. And there's the engine block stuck in there. There we go. Just got lost in shipping. All right, so these little pieces here are going to have to come out as well, and I will try to just punch them out with my fingernail, and that's not really doing the trick. So we definitely do need the hobby knife here. Notice they're connected on both sides, so we'll just run the hobby knife down both sides quickly, and they should just, well, they're not going to pop out, but they should come out easily after that's being done. And if you had a particularly strong fingernail, you might be able to just poke it through, but we've got a knife, so we'll use it. Some of these, there we go. I think that was the one I tried to use with my fingers. That one got a little stuck. All right. So I'll just pop the blade in here, and that should be enough to drive out the little bits. Yep. So far, so good. And of course, you can see the back. It's not clean yet, so I will need to do something about that once I get the majority of the little excess scrap pieces removed. And do yourself a favor, don't cut yourself doing this. You're just using the knife to push, not to actually cut anything at this point. But, keep your fingers out of the way. All right. Now, checking the other side, there are little bits here and there. So, any place I see them, I'm going to try to remove them with, or at least encourage their departure with the knife. It looks like they're mostly on the left side as I flip this over. So, it looks pretty good. I suspect that when we put these little pieces in, that will go a long way toward removing whatever little bits of scrap are left. All right, time to actually build the motor mount then. So, like we do frequently, we need to make some measurements, which would require us to have a ruler. And there's the ruler. It's hidden underneath the wax paper. Okay, so my usual approach here is stick your finger into the motor mount, and then we need marks at 3/8 of an inch. So that's here. 3/8. We need one at 1 inch. And we need one at 2.5. Just somewhat typical places to mark. So there we go. Shouldn't need the ruler anymore. Need the hobby knife again though. So this one, the one at 2.5, we are cutting in here in order to put the engine hook. So just slicing in like so. Before I put the knife away, I want to make sure this will actually fit. And it does. It's fantastic. Hobby knife goes away. Next, we need part D, which is a little adapter. Oh, here it is. That's going to go over top, hold the engine hook in, and that's getting slid down to the 1-inch mark. While we're at it, since we're going to be gluing, the engine block needs to go in as well. So I'm just going to do both of these gluings at the same time. So a little bit of glue inside the tube at the very edge, and that's for the engine block. And then a bit of glue around the 1-inch mark. Not actually at the 1-inch mark though, because that's just where this little piece is going to stop. So I'm going to slide that down to the 1-inch mark. There we go. Clean up my gluey mess. Okay, and then the engine block goes in like so. Push it down to make sure that it's where it ought to be. There's a little bit of space between it and the hook, but it doesn't really matter. The hook does a pretty decent job, but as we've seen with that Big Bertha build, it is not adequate by itself, so we do want an engine block as well. All right, so that's a good first step. Next, we need to put these adapters on. Now, this one is going to go right at the end, and this one is going to go at our 3/8 inch mark. So I'm going to put this one on and slide it past where it ought to be. Same deal with this one. And then I'm going to put the glue right at the edge, the far edge. There we go. And also at, and this time I'm going to do it at, since the distance matters this time, at the 3/8 inch mark. This is smearing nicely coming out of the nozzle that I have here, so I'm not going to worry about using the dowel. What I am going to do is I'm going to just push down. There we go. And that made a gluey mess, of course, but that's okay. It's also made a bit of a gluey mess on the edge of the adapter here, but don't really care. I do want to clean that up before I make a big mess though. And then I'm going to slide carefully, so I'm not bumping the back work that I already did. I'm going to slide the front one that has all the details up to the 3/8 inch mark. Now, important to check here is that it is actually perpendicular to the ground. It is not here at all, as I can see. And I want the ring part to be it's basically sticking straight up and down for your perspective. I don't want it crooked. I want it as straight as possible. This one's easy because I just used the ground. This one is not as easy, but it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be basically perpendicular. What I do want to do, though, because it probably matters, is double check my measurement here. And as you can see, I'm actually closer to 1/4 of an inch, so I'm going to slide this back a little bit. So I think what happened there was part of the ring was at the right distance, and the other part wasn't, and I slid it the wrong direction. That's an easy fix. So that's almost there. Ooh, a little more. And yeah, I mean, I'm removing some of the glue. I'm leaving it where it doesn't belong at this point. But I'm going to put a fillet on this before things are all said and done. And that is the right distance. Okay, so now that that is taken care of, the instructions say to let this dry. I think what I'm going to do, though, is just kind of power through. These little bits are going to go, in like this. So you can see that this is actually, there is some validity in saying let it dry, because if I'm going to have to push this into the hole, I don't want to be readjusting the engine block, the adapter. So maybe that is actually a decent place to take a break here. And yeah, we'll let it dry. I guess the last thing we could do is, since we have it out, we have the weight, these pieces of clay here. So let's take care of that. Just kind of it's nice to not have excess pieces of stuff floating around. So here's the nose cone. Because this has fins that are forward, not right at the back of the rocket, we actually need to add some weight to the nose. The goal here is that we want the center of gravity, that would be the balance point, to be ahead of, and I'm probably shaking the table doing this, to be ahead of the center of pressure. And if you just have fins at the back of a rocket, that's not really a problem. But if you have forward fins or fins like this that are supposed to be wings that are like mid-mounted, the center of gravity is probably not in the right place. The easiest way to fix that, if you don't want to move the fins, is to add weight to the nose. Now, of course, the drawback to this is if you make the rocket heavier, it's not going to fly as high. But this kit is not going to be a high flyer. That's not really the point. It's supposed to look cool. So in any event, we're going to add a little bit of weight in the form of some clay. So I have taken the blocks, and as you've noticed, I've just made them into a snake, preschool style, and they're going to go in there. Fortunately, the hole on the back of this is really big. So in they go. This is actually a pretty long nose cone, so I'm going to need a dowel. I'm not sure, that's not going to be long enough. Fortunately, I have a lot of balsa scrap just kind of kicking around. So all I'm going to do is take my stick here and use it to push the clay down into the nose cone as far as it will go. The nice thing about the clay is that it's a little tacky. It's not very, but you don't need to glue this in because I don't know. I mean, the clay is just sticky enough so that if we get it in the right place, it should just kind of stick in there regardless of what we do to it after the fact. I'm going to look in here and oh boy, yeah. So I have a huge part of the worm that's just not pushed down at all. So yeah. You do want to get this in the nose cone as deep as possible. Partially, sorry, this is a little distracting, trying to look down the nose cone while I'm sticking a stick down it as well. I'm really trying not to poke myself in the eye here. Anyway, the value of putting the weight in the nose cone is to move the center of gravity. Well, you want to move it as far as possible, so it needs to be rammed into the nose as far up the nose as you can muster. And I can actually see it. I doubt it that you could see it, but from my perspective, because the light's over here, I can see a shadow on the nose cone of where the clay is. It's just darker looking. And that actually kind of helps, at least on the edges. But I still do need to look down the middle to make sure that the central part of the clay doesn't stick up crazily. So let's see. Yeah, you can see it down in there. That's pretty good. We'll call that good enough. So at this point, this really needs to dry before I mess with it any further with these little doodads. I think I'm also going to run the blade through these slots again just to clear them up in case I got any glue in there or whatnot. And I think I'm actually going to also take those little burrs off. But you don't need to watch me do that. I'm just going to kind of run the blade along and make sure that I get these things as cleaned up as possible. Probably take this one off as well. Okay. So you don't need to watch that. At this point, we will wrap it up for now. Next time, we will do the end work on the motor mount and probably attach some fins. So I will see you then. Thanks for watching.